Well, hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to the IMF. I'm Jerry Rice, Director of Communications here at the Fund, and I couldn't be more pleased to be kicking off today's session of The Exchange. The Exchange is a virtual series that we host here at the IMF to discuss how to build a sustainable and inclusive recovery with key global leaders. And today, it's our privilege, and it really is a privilege, to welcome two of the world's most outstanding leaders, women leaders, IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva and the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, Chrystia Freeland. They're going to discuss a topic at the very heart of building a sustainable, inclusive recovery from the crisis, and that is closing the gender gap and advancing gender equality. No Women Left Behind is the title of this compelling conversation. Enjoy.
Hello and welcome, everyone. We are extremely fortunate today to host Chrystia Freeland, Canada's Deputy Prime Minister and its first ever female Finance Minister. Chrystia earned prominence and very high marks for stellar performance in her previous positions, especially as Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister and beforehand as International Trade Minister. This is when I met her for the first time. And is now deploying the same energy, the same determination to charter the Canadian economy on a path to recovery from the COVID-induced recession. And she does it with paying close attention to those most severely impacted: low-skilled workers, young people, women. Chrystia has always been a strong voice for women. At a G20 meeting recently, speaker after speaker after speaker forgot that there is more than 50% of the population women until her turn came. She has used her incredible star power to advance gender equality. And today we will learn straight from her how Canada is spearheading work on gender budgeting and what it means to have a coherent gender strategy effectively aligned with the budget process. And we will discuss what practical steps Canada is pursuing to prevent the COVID-19 pandemic from rolling back gains in women's economic opportunities. There has been a troubling sign that the recession is a she-cession, that women's jobs are more severely impacted than those of men. New research from the fund finds that the more accurate term may be mom-cessions, that women with young children, mothers, particularly less educated ones, were the most adversely affected group during the crisis. They suffered large job losses and cuts in working hours. Now they're coming back to work, but at a much slower pace than any other group. So here is our message. We must not allow gender equality to slip back. We have to advance policies that can not only help women recover from the crisis, but also strengthen their position in society and their contribution to our economies. And here, Chrystia, I'm going to quote you: "Let's fight the big fight." So to do so at the fund, In honor of our conversation today, I'm very pleased to announce that we are creating a new position of Senior Advisor on Gender to strengthen our work on gender equality as we support our members to recover from the crisis. We are appointing one of our most senior and respected economists, Ratna Sahai, in this position. So with this piece of good news of our true heartfelt commitment, let me turn to Chrystia. Welcome, Chrystia, and my question first is about your own experience. You're a mother of 3 children. You have had to handle your job and your family. What lessons you have drawn for gender budgeting out of it?
Well, first of all, Kristalina, it is so nice to see you, and thank you very, very much for hosting this conversation. I also really smiled when you referred to that G20 meeting. I'm glad you remembered and you noticed. And it was really, really striking for me that we got through about 20 interventions before someone said, hey, women are part of the economy and women are part of the COVID recession. And you know what? We have a saying here in Canada, add women, change politics. And I really feel I'm seeing that happening right now on the international stage. Having you as the managing director of the IMF, having Christine Lagarde at the ECB, having Janet Yellen as Secretary of the Treasury, I feel like there's a little bit of a sisterhood in international finance, and it's making a difference. It's easier to raise what might have traditionally been called women's issues when there's another woman at the table to say, hey, guys, this is an economic issue. So thanks for pointing that out. In terms of me, it's true. I have 3 children. My youngest was 10 years old when COVID first hit. And I won't lie to people, it has been hard. I think the hardest thing has been online school, especially for my youngest, who initially really, really struggled. That was a hard transition. And what was heartbreaking for me was I was so busy with my job, I couldn't really help him. And, you know, he actually pulled himself together and is doing really well, but that is hard. Having said that, Kristalina, oh, and the other thing that I will say, my other COVID working mother reflection is, Kristalina, I think I have the messiest house in Canada, possibly in the world. That is the aspect of my domestic life, which has gone completely to pieces. But, you know, your question does make me think about something else, which is, even as, you know, I've been struggling after a hard day at work to load the dishwasher and maybe feeling a little bit sorry for myself, I have thought about the women in Canada, and I would say the women around the world, mothers working a low-wage job, struggling to get through COVID. And in Canada, those are the people who are the hardest hit. And it has been a triple challenge because they are very often the essential workers who, unlike me, right, and unlike you, have had to go out, expose themselves to COVID danger to do their jobs, have not been able to be at home as their own children have been struggling with things like virtual schooling, as mine have been. Some of them have gotten sick, and that has been a real challenge to self-isolate in a home that is not that big. So, you know, in Canada, and I think that the data shows this is a pretty common situation, you know, the single group of people who have been the hardest hit by this are low-wage working mothers. And in putting together our budget, here it is. You see the cover, and the cover says a lot about what's in it. In our budget, one of our starting points was, this is a group that has been hard hit. We have to lift this group up in order to restart our whole economy.
I am so impressed by your account of how COVID has impacted you and your household. And to be frank, it gave me a sense of relief because I thought it was only my house that is really messy. Now I know it's working women
Mine is
everywhere.
worse, Kristalina, I promise.
But I want to go a little bit deeper on the Canadian experience with gender-based budgeting. You have been ahead of many other countries in saying we have to integrate women into the budgeting process if we want women to contribute fully to the economy. As you have been moving in this direction, you actually drew on the experience of women. And one thing I noticed that may be of interest to other policymakers, to our audience, is that you went for a women-only task force to help you as you budget in a way that is inclusive for women. So can you tell us a little bit more about the task force? What is a memorable experience from the discussions you have had? How is this impacting what is in the document that you just have shown to the audience?
Thanks for the question, Kristalina. And we did convene a task force on women and the economy, co-chaired by me and my Associate Minister of Finance, Mona Fortier. And both that task force and our GB Plus approach to all policy making in Canada have been really, really helpful to me. I would say helpful in two ways. The first is, if you don't measure something, you often don't actually take it into account. And so many of the traditional metrics and traditional approaches to looking at the economy don't really focus on and don't really count women. And so creating a structure in our policy making that does that has been really, really helpful. In terms of our task force on women in the economy, I would say it has been helpful in a million different ways. Many specific policy recommendations have come out from that group. When I first invited women to join that group, one of them said to me, "Is this going to be women only?" And I said, "You know what? Yeah, it is." And she said, "Well, why is that?" And I said to her, there are so many groups. This was a senior woman executive in Canada. And I said to her, you and I both sit in so many groups and throughout our careers have been at so many tables where we are the only woman present. I said, "Isn't that true?" And she said, "Yeah, it's true." So I said, "You know what? Just for once, let's have a group that's influential, that is women talking to women." And I'm actually really, really glad we made that decision. It's been, I would say, the single most important thing that group has done for me. And I want to, if they're watching, I want to say thank you very much, members of our task force. Is helped me to have the courage of my convictions. It can still be hard, Kristalina, to get past some of the mansplaining and to be unapologetic and unashamed about saying, "You know what? Yeah, this policy is a feminist policy. It's a social policy. But it is actually an economic policy. It is actually going to drive jobs and growth." And to say there is no contradiction there. And, I would say that for me, the key example is in our budget, we are putting a big emphasis on early learning and childcare. one of the centerpiece policies. We are committing $30 billion, and for Canada, that's a lot of money, over 5 years, and $9 billion a year ongoing, built into the fiscal framework to build a universal, affordable system of early learning and childcare across Canada. And our ambition is that 5 years from now, every Canadian will be able to have access to high quality early learning and childcare for an average of $10 a day. That is a big commitment. And as finance minister, I see that as a tremendous driver of long-term economic growth for Canada. We see this as the economic policy that will kind of boost in a step change Canada's economic capacity more than anything Canada has done since the NAFTA free trade agreement with the United States. So, I say it is good feminist policy, but it is also good economic policy. And how the Women's Task Force has helped me there is they have been passionate in their agreement. And that's really useful because there still can be a bias. And I don't know if you encounter this personally, Kristalina, or in the IMF, but there still can be a bias to kind of say, well, real infrastructure investment that drives real jobs and growth, that has to be physical infrastructure. It has to be something done by men wearing hard hats and gloves. Building a bridge, that's an infrastructure investment that's going to drive economic growth. Building a daycare center, that's just for the ladies. That's not actually real economic policy. And you and I know that's not the case. Building a daycare center is a huge driver of economic growth for us in Canada. We've already seen it in Quebec, which has a system of affordable early learning and childcare universally across the province. And they have seen it has boosted women's labor force participation and boosted economic growth. So we know it works, but there's still, that bias in policymaking. And I would encourage everyone, women as well as men who are policymakers, try to set up some structures that help you to push against that bias, because it can be hard to do it by yourself.
Exactly what we are doing at the fund. One of the fantastic things about the IMF is it has these very smart economists that are in relentless pursuit of discovering new sources of growth. And not a big surprise, one of the big sources of growth is investment in human capital, and especially investment in early childhood development. That has the added benefit that when it is done properly, with the capacity to get kids to learn together, it opens up more opportunities for women to participate in the labor force. Yes, now we know that there are many jobs we can do from home. But even if we do them from home, there is this issue of looking after children in a way that gives them undivided attention, especially when they're very young. And that is the reason why one of the recommendations that comes out of our analysis of the impact of COVID on women and women participation in the labor force is exactly that. Policymakers need to focus on childcare and schools. As we reopen, make sure that vaccinations go very fast where they would make a difference, and also make sure that you think of social infrastructure on equal footing with physical infrastructure. So we are entirely on that same page. And I want to add one more thing. We have been very happy that Canada has driven gender-based budgeting, because fund research shows that while there are differences between advanced economies and emerging markets, developing economies, in what makes a real dent on gender inequality through the budget, everywhere gender-based budgeting helps. In advanced economies, in particular, by advancing early childhood development and making it possible for women to count on it. In developing countries, it is more around rural roads, safety of transportation, so women can go to work without fear of being attacked or raped, which unfortunately is still a problem in many less secure places. But when you look at the budget with this gender lens, you come up with a different direction of your scarce public resources that open up more contribution of women. In my previous job at the World Bank, one of the big discoveries we made was that the loss of earning, because women are still not participating fully in the economy, is gigantic. Over their lifetime, this is $172 trillion. Why? Because 20% difference between men and women participating. So we have taken that very much on board. We actually have provided training to our staff on gender-based budgeting first, and then we included it in our surveillance. We have covered 114 countries looking at how the budget can be more gender sensitive. And a very important development as a result over this couple of years is that countries are asking us for capacity development. We have done 58 programs to train finance authorities to be able to do exactly that, to do what you're doing so well in Canada. And we look at it as the right thing to do for equality, but primarily as the right thing to do for the economy. There is no way we can be in a world in which we leave out part of our productive potential and then expect that we would do very, very well. And I am pleased to say that more and more ministers of finance recognize feminist policy is just great economic policy. So what next for you? How are you going to raise the bar further?
So I first of all just want to say to you, Kristalina, and to all the IMF economists who may be part of this conversation and listening, thank you so much for that work. You can help all of us in setting the standards and figuring out how to do what, shockingly, it's 2021, but this is still a relatively new approach to policymaking. And having the IMF in the vanguard is incredibly helpful to all of us. So I just want to say thank you. Please keep on going. And Canada is very excited about working with you, both as a country, but also in supporting the policy development. And I also want to say quickly, Kristalina, on early learning and childcare, I'm glad that you mentioned and kind of underscored also the learning part, because I really see early learning and childcare as an economic triple play. It is an economic benefit because it allows parents, but let's be honest with ourselves, usually mothers, to participate in the labor force, and that is great. It also, if you do it right, and in Canada, we're committed to building a system of high quality early learning and childcare. That's going to create a lot of great jobs for early learning and childcare workers. And then the third point that you emphasize, Kristalina, is if you create high quality, accessible, affordable spaces, my objective is we're going to raise a generation of Canadian super kids. And I hope that the whole world will raise a generation of super kids. And if we provide high quality early learning and childcare to our youngest people, that for sure is going to help.
I so much agree that we are on a good path. You mentioned before that you're seeing now more women in leadership positions. And of course, it creates a very different environment for the next generation of women to step forward. In my own experience, Christine Lagarde was the first ever woman to lead the IMF. She broke the glass ceiling. I came after her. no cuts, much easier. And there was a very interesting conversation with our dean who said, well, after Christine Lagarde and now you, will there ever be a man to lead the IMF? And I reflected on that and I said, oh, sure, there would be a man, but you know what? We have about 6 decades still to catch up to bring equality. The more serious response to that is it should not be anymore a surprise that women are stepping forward and they are doing their duty to serve society. My great colleagues here at the IMF have been incredibly supportive of us not only driving this agenda outside, in other words, in our engagements with the members to do the research, the policy engagement, the capacity development that I spoke about, but that we ourselves at the IMF ought to be an institution where men and women are equally positioned to contribute at all levels. When I started 18 months ago, we had 25% of women directors. This is the senior technical level. Now we have 38% of women directors. And not one time it would be a decision made just on the basis of gender. It is truly on merits, but with very active promotion to women to put themselves forward, because we know very often women are less willing to do so than men. And I think that the support I got from the staff of the fund for gender equality, for diversity, the support I got from the board gives me full confidence that it is not too far in the future when you would look at the fund and we would be exactly like the world around us at all levels in our institution. What has helped tremendously is like you with your task force that is supporting you. We have at the fund a working group on gender, and 2 great women are co-chairing this working group. They have taken this responsibility out of conviction, and they are responsible for a lot of the research we have been discussing here, a lot of the lifting of gender equality. And what I want to do now is to turn to them. First to Stefania Fabrizio, so she can pose a question. And with this, we pass the floor to Stefania next.
This crisis and related lockdown measure have forced many parents to choose between keeping their job and stay at home to take care of children and of the housework. And we have seen that more women than men gave up their job to provide childcare and homework. One of the main drivers of this choice is the persistent gender wage gap that forces a natural selection between who keeps the job and who takes care of children. My question is for Ms. Freeland. In your experience, what policy can help reduce the gender wage gap? Is there any insight related to your country that you can share with us?
Okay, so I want to say, first of all, to Stefania, ciao. Very nice to meet you. And thank you very much for your work. I think that it is so important that the IMF has an advisory group on gender. Thank you, Kristalina, for championing that. And, you know, really important to have a little bit of a highlighter on these issues. And I do agree with you, Stefania, that there are economic reasons as well as social ones, that the mother tends to be the one who stays home when it becomes really hard to combine taking care of children and working. In Canada, we're doing a few things to push against that. One of them actually is a strong measure in this budget, which is when it comes to low-wage workers, more women are disproportionately in that category in Canada. So a disproportionate number of our low-wage workers are women. And we really believe that it's important to support low-wage workers. I think COVID has really taught us who is essential. And in every society, we have learned among the most essential people are the people who earn the least money and work in the toughest conditions. So in our budget, we have a significant expansion of a program that is the Canada Workers Benefit. It's a top up to the wages of low wage workers. We've added over $8 billion to that program, and that will mean that an additional 1 million Canadians benefit from it, and it will lift 100,000 Canadians out of poverty. We've also made it easier for the lower earning partner in a couple to continue to claim that benefit for longer. And so taken together, those measures are going to really boost the income of low wage working women, which is absolutely key to have an impact on the gender dynamics, Stefania, that you talked about. Also, of course, it's important to encourage women to do high-paying jobs that women haven't traditionally done. And so we have a real push in our country overall and in this budget to do a couple of things. One is encouraging women to enter the skilled trades. Those are very, very high-paying professions. Women and young women and girls often don't see that as a career path for them, but those can be amazing, amazing careers, and we have some programs specifically designed to help women there. The second push is really significant support in this budget for women entrepreneurs. We really believe that by empowering women to start their own businesses, that's a great way to help them, to help their families, but also to create some great jobs across the country. And I spoke to some wonderful women entrepreneurs yesterday, a group of Filipina Canadian women entrepreneurs in Winnipeg. And two things really struck me about them. One was how much they cared about their workers and how much emphasis they had put on not letting people go during COVID. And I am so grateful to them for that. They have helped their whole communities by doing that. And the other one was their real compassion for their communities. A number of them, restaurateurs, talked about offering food for free to people who needed it in their neighborhoods. I'm not saying that women in any way have a monopoly on being compassionate, on caring for their workers, or on caring for people experiencing homelessness, but this group of Canadian women entrepreneurs sure did, and I'm glad that we're supporting them.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chrystia. It is exactly this practical engagement that helps policymakers to learn what is working, what is not working, how to fix it. Thank you for sharing this experience. And now I would like to turn to Cheng Hong Lim. She's the other co-chair. She's going to come up with her question.
This question is for both the Managing Director and the Deputy Prime Minister. You are world leaders, much admired and respected, and inspiring change that is making a difference to people's lives every day. Women and men see you as a role model, but I'm sure in your journey from where you started to where you are today, you faced and overcame many challenges. There were ups and downs, and perhaps there were even periods of self-doubt. Given your experiences, if you had the opportunity to travel back in time, what would be the advice you would give to your younger self, and why? Thank you.
Should we let Chrystia go first? Chrystia, do you want me to go first?
No, I think, Kristalina, you should go first.
I should go first. Okay. So what I would tell my younger self is it is okay to stand for yourself. It is okay to make sure you're not giving more work just because you are a woman. And it is totally fine to check whether you are paid equally to your male colleagues. So what is my experience? When I was in my first career as a professor, I ended up routinely taking on the classes of my male colleagues. They would have some excuse, oh, I have to do this, can you please take my class? I have to do that, can you please take my class? And then I realized that I was working virtually twice as much as the men. But I never said a word. I said to myself, I need to prove I'm as good as they are. Well, I am. Now, the silver lining of that story is that I actually built more professional muscle and more resilience, and here I am, the head of the IMF. But I still think it was wrong that I just let it happen. I didn't react to it. My second story is closer here to home. When I was at the World Bank, I would never check whether when in the year there is the time for performance evaluation and then it is reflected in your salary, whether I was treated appropriately. Never. I didn't think it was right to ask. So many years later, like I was in my 12th year at the bank, they did a review on pay gap between men and women, and they discovered that they had to give me a big boost because year after year I would be drifting behind the average of my colleagues' men. So I can tell you it was wrong that they did it, but it also was frankly wrong that I was so passive, not just for me, but for the principle of equality. If I were to encourage women to do something, the younger generation, believe in yourself. We always tend to be more demanding. Women routinely put themselves forward only when they're pushed. That was my case. Every single time I would go up in my professional standing, it would be because I'm virtually pulled up by my hair, not because I would say, yes, I'm fantastic, I should go for it. And that is always seen in recruitments, like you have a man and a woman, and you interview, there are 6 criteria, they both meet 3 of them, and the man says, I'm fantastic, I meet 3 very important criteria, and I'm offering my fabulous personality. And the woman sits there and says, well, I don't know, maybe there is somebody better than me. That happens time and again. So to all women, believe in yourself. Step up, stand for yourself, because by doing so, you stand for women everywhere.
Though that is great advice, Kristalina, and especially that last point of yours, it's so interesting. It resonates so much with me. And if we were talking with my Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, he would tell you that is his experience of recruiting political people to run for political office, including me, by the way. He says when he calls a man up and says, you know, do you want to run? The man usually says, why did it take you so long to ask me? But if you call up a woman, she's like, really, me? Are you sure? Do you really think I can do it? So I think that is excellent advice. It's okay for everyone to put their hands up, and maybe women have been taught to be more reluctant. I have 3 quick pieces of advice. The first one is advice my late and wonderful mother offered me. My mother was a kind of pioneering working woman, came to Canada as an immigrant child, but got a law degree. She took me as an infant to classes at law school. That was her childcare solution. And she knew how hard it was to work and have children. And so she actually retired 6 months after my first daughter was born and came and lived with me to help me. And I remember once I think after my second daughter had been born, I was just so tired, and I was worried I wasn't doing a good job with my children, and I wasn't doing a good job at work, and I was just crying. And I said to my mother, can I keep going? Should I just quit? And she said to me, right now when your children are young, it just seems impossible, and it seems as if it will never end. But you'll blink your eye and your children will be in school and you'll be past this really hard time. But if you drop out now, it will be almost impossible to recover. And so, for anyone who is listening, who is a mother of young children, let me pass on that advice from my mother and just say, hang in there. I know it's really hard. I know, certainly speaking for Canada, we don't offer you all the support that we should. We're trying to get better, but really hang in there. You can do it. My second piece of advice is to women, remember that you don't have to be perfect. I think that women, girls are still much more taught that they need to do everything exactly right. And that if they're not perfect, they shouldn't be allowed to do the thing. And I observe that men, throughout my professional career, are much more comfortable saying, yeah, I didn't get that exactly right today, but I'll go out and tomorrow I'll be better. And I would say to women, we need to get better at that. We need to get better at making a mistake, brushing yourself off, forgiving yourself, and just keeping on going. And then the third thing I would say is look for sisters who can support you. I'm lucky. I have 3 actual sisters. And as Kristalina knows, I'm Ukrainian Canadian. And in Ukrainian, the word for cousin is the word for sister. It means second, you say second sister for your cousin. And I have many wonderful sister cousins too. And in my professional life, I have found a lot of supportive sisters as well, including, if I may say, Kristalina, you. And that really makes a difference. Having someone who can reinforce your ideas, be at that G20 table, and when you kind of think, okay, I'm going to talk about women no one else has. Having the managing director of the IMF say, actually, that was a good point, that is incredibly reinforcing. And I would say, be a good sister to the other women in your personal life and in your professional life.
Fantastic. I could not agree more with all that you have said. And I could not agree more that we have an obligation to give that confidence that I talked about by also admitting it could be something not perfect, but we can make it right. Being there for each other, being there for other women, and hanging on even when it is hard. I just loved all the points you made. Recently, somebody asked me, Kristalina, now there are more women in senior positions. Do you talk to each other? Yes, we do. And that is indeed building the necessary sense of a tide is turning that I actually believe is what is happening, and this is why we cannot afford COVID-19 to push that tide back. One interesting anecdote, I had a similar conversation with Janet Yellen, who is fantastic, brought so much upbeat multilateralism with her arrival. And in our conversation that was on Womenomics, a similar theme, we found out as we prepared, because women always prepare, that we were born on the same date, on August 13th. So I checked and I found that, no, you're not August 13th, but you're very close. So let me finish by saying I know when I'm going to be sending you my very best birthday wishes, and it is in the month of August. Now, let me turn to a very important final word of our newly selected and appointed senior advisor on gender. Ratna is going to lift up our work. I know she would do a fantastic job, and I just want you, Chrystia, to have a chance to meet her. Ratna.
Thank you, Kristalina. It's truly an honor and a privilege to serve as the IMF's first senior advisor on gender. In my life, I have come across many extraordinary women who have been my source of inspiration. Not least my 86-year-old sick mother, who even today and with great optimism is facing the threat of the COVID surge in India. There is a lot of work ahead, and I very much look forward to working with you, Kristalina, you, Chrystia, my IMF colleagues, and external partners to find ways for women to realize their true potential, which we all know very well will benefit society at large. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity.
It is fantastic that you accepted, Ratna. I'm very grateful to you. And I'm sending my best wishes to all in India that are struggling, to everybody around the world. My very best wishes to your mother, and my very, very best wishes to all women that are there for their families, for their communities, for their countries. When women are empowered, everybody wins. Unfortunately, that is all we have had time for. I just could not believe that we ran out of time so quickly. I want us to thank Chrystia for joining me today. It was a fantastic, inspiring conversation. And I would like to sign in for you to come again. We will welcome you to tell us more about your experience at the helm of finance in Canada. Thank you, Chrystia, and thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you.